Last night I watched the ultimate cut of the movie Watchmen. This version is almost 3.5 hours long. I was up pretty late finishing it, and I was just going to do a little review for it. A quick recap here of my thoughts on Watchmen. You can read my review for the director's cut on this channel. I think this is a great film. So there's so many interesting philosophical ideas. I love the political commentary. I love what it says about superheroes. I love nonlinear storytelling. So I think this is a really fascinating film. As far as Black Freighter, which is a little 25-minute animated short they made, surprisingly, I like this. I really didn't think I would, but I think this stands alone as an interesting short film about a guy who, in his righteous quest to save his family, becomes the very thing he's trying to destroy. And so surprisingly, I really like this. Now what we have is the Watchmen, the so-called ultimate cut, the complete story, they call it. And this is the director's cut of the movie, interwoven with scenes from Tales of the Black Freighter. I should probably just make it clear right now that I'm going to be reviewing this as a standalone film. I've read the graphic novel 5 times, of course, and I love it. But I think every adaptation deserves to be reviewed by itself first. If I have time, I'll talk about it as an adaptation. But just does it work by itself is the first question, I think. And at first, I thought it was. You know, the first few segments where it cuts away to Black Freighter, I'm like, this is actually kind of interesting. This is kind of working amazingly. And then it just started to fall apart. It completely disrupts the flow of the movie. One good example is when Dr. Manhattan says, you know, leave me alone, and he teleports to Mars, and there's a brief scene with a little dialogue with Laurie and Dan, and then she says, rough world out there. Then we cut to a Black Freighter sequence about, 4 or 5 minutes long. Then we finally cut back to Doc on Mars. And the flow was completely gone. Maybe it doesn't sound like it by explaining it, but when I was watching it, it's like it didn't make sense. Like, we see him on Mars, and it's like it was kind of a long time ago that he left, and now we're finally seeing him. The flow just didn't make sense. In the theatrical cut, the flow was terrible. It just cut straight to Mars. It was way too fast. In the director's cut, I thought it was a very good balance. We see he teleports, a little bit of reaction, and then we get to Mars, and it sets up the 10-minute Dr. Manhattan origin sequence very well. And this one, it was too long between when he leaves and when the flashback sequence starts. So director's cut is the perfect compromise there, I guess. Good middle ground. There was a quote of a review of the director's cut that I thought was really good. I think it was from blu-ray.com. It said that the reviewer said he was amazed at Snyder's ability to juggle so much and drop so little. I think that sums it up pretty well. One of the reasons I'm amazed at the fact that this story works, even though there's so much. In Black Freighter, and the ultimate cut, it finally the story just totally collapses under the weight of it all into this big melting pot of blah. It's just there's no through line anymore. It so disrupts the flow of the movie completely. Don't get me wrong, I like the fact, one of the things I really love and respect about the director's cut is that it's a much slower paced film. I tend to like slower paced movies. But this is it's not so much about the pacing, it's so incredibly jarring. It disrupts the story. It doesn't have well, I guess I'll talk about it later. It's how it's relevant to some of the scenes. Some of the Bernie scenes, I like some, didn't like others. There were 1 or 2 that I really didn't like, where I just thought the acting was terrible. And the Bernie scenes, the relevance to the story just isn't. It doesn't make sense to me. And so it was at the end. It's so incredibly jarring going to Black Freighter, and the Bernie scenes don't fit, and so it just doesn't work. One thing I want to talk about in particular is the final scene, the final Black Freighter segment, which is at the very end when Veidt they're in Antarctica, and Veidt explains his devious plot to Dan and Rorschach, and then it cuts to he says, I did it 35 minutes ago. Or sorry, I triggered it 35 minutes ago. It is in the movie. Then there's those screens, and it kind of pans over to the bomb and goes to white, and then we have the final Black Freighter sequence where he's swimming towards the ship. And then you have all those great lines about, the world I tried to save was lost beyond recall. Then we have one last scene with the Bernies, and then New York is destroyed. One plus of this, I'll admit, is that now that we've kind of gotten to know the 2 Bernies now, and so now when they're killed, there's much more of an emotional punch. That is something that's kind of lacking in the director's cut, is that when everyone's killed, it's like we don't really know these people. We've kind of seen them, but we don't really know who they are. And so you don't feel that emotional punch you should. And that's really, this helps a little bit. But it's not worth what had to be sacrificed. Well, the first time you see the movie, and Veidt is explaining his plot, and I'm kind of thinking, oh, here we go, the villain explaining his evil plot. And he says, I'm going to do this. Haha, you can't stop me. And then we'll stop him. And then he says, I triggered it 35 minutes ago, and New York is destroyed. And like as it's being destroyed, it's just like, no, no way, like he actually did it. There's so much shock value in, I'm not a comic book villain. Boom, New York blowing up, and such a great commentary also on that aspect of comic books. And that's such a cliche, the villain explaining his plot. But it's like, what do you think I am, a comic book villain? Pfft, I just did it. And so there's so much shock value in that moment, and I think a lot of that is lost by having a Black Freighter sequence here and the Bernies. And it's just like, we gotta blow up. As soon as he says that line, I triggered it 35 minutes ago. You have to cut to New York blowing up as quickly as possible to get that power. I mean, I appreciated that. I thought the connection with Veidt was pretty clear, just as it is in the book. Where it becomes clear that the world I tried to save was lost beyond recall. All my noble intentions led me to this. It's pretty obvious what it's talking about. I appreciated that. So as a standalone film, I would say the Ultimate Cut is a mess. It's an interesting mess, definitely, but it's still a mess. It doesn't work. It doesn't flow. It just the whole story falls apart because of it. So that's as a standalone film. As far as an adaptation, Black Freighter is one of my favorite aspects of Watchmen. I've said before, one of the reasons I love this book is that it does things that only a graphic novel can do. It takes advantage of this medium more than any other graphic novel I've ever read, for sure. And it just was one of those things that I never felt like it could work in a movie. The thing about one of the reasons that makes it work so well in the book is that it's amazingly seamless. You have the story that almost couldn't be more different than the story with the main characters in it, and yet somehow it works. Somehow it still flows. One of the reasons it does this is that there's a lot of irony, and that a lot of the things that's said in Black Freighter, a lot of the things that are happening, are vaguely similar to what's happening alongside in the other story. And one of my favorite examples of this is in the chapter, I think it's chapter 10. It's called Two Riders Were Approaching. It begins with the president and the vice president landing. There's two riders. Then you have a scene with two riders in a Black Freighter segment where it's the sailor and the woman he just killed riding back, two riders. And of course, at the end you have Dan and Rorschach riding to Veidt's little palace. So there's three instances in that chapter of two riders approaching, and that's just one of the ways that they seamlessly integrate Black Freighter into the rest of the story in the book. In the movie, there was never any clear relevance at all of, it would cut to a Black Freighter scene, but there was no particular reason to cut to it. It's not like they spread all the Black Freighter scenes throughout in the movie, but there's no particular reason like one particular scene should be in that particular spot. In the book, it's very clear this scene has to be here because it's talking about this scene, specifically. And I never got that. Like, there was never any. I never got like. There's never any in the movie. There was no reason to cut away at that moment. It was just, well, let's spread them out, and that's just kind of how it came. Another thing is that there's. I'm not sure why this is, but in a graphic novel, this thing you can do again. Another thing you can do in the book that they can't do in the movie. In the movie, when you cut away to a Black Freighter segment, it feels like in order to justify it, the Black Freighter sequence has to be like 3 to 5 minutes long. You can't just cut away for 10 seconds and cut back. Somehow that just wouldn't make sense. In the book you can. In the book there are instances where it'll just cut away for a couple frames and come right back. Sometimes it won't even show any frames. It'll just a little Black Freighter dialogue box will appear, and so just little snippets, little hints. And so that's another way to make it seamless. When you can just cut to it for just a second, it gets to the point where you hardly even notice it. You just sort of accept it as part of the fabric of the story. And in the movie, you can't do that. Whenever you cut away, it's very, very jarring. So this is just one of those things that it works so well in a graphic novel, and you just can't do it in the movie. So therefore, I'm not going to criticize Snyder for any of this. I'm not going to say, oh, he messed it up. I mean, it's Watchmen. That's what it is. It's a graphic novel. It's nothing else. And this is just one of those things that was never going to work in a movie. So overall, my view of the Ultimate Cut. Now, don't get me wrong. As a fan of the book, this is interesting. I'm glad to have seen this. It's cool to see someone attempt this. And, there's a lot of geek out moments if you're a fan of the book. If you're not a fan of the book, I mean, I guess if you really loved the director's cut, it's like your favorite movie, okay, go ahead and check this out. But if you just, oh yeah, I like the director's cut, but it's not your favorite movie or anything, I can't think of a reason for you really to see this. The director's cut is still definitely the definitive version of the movie. If you're a fan of the book, I think you gotta at least check this out. It's interesting. It's a cool experiment. But there's no doubt that it's not the best version of the film. If you're seeing it for the first time, there's no doubt you gotta see the director's cut first. This is just a cool experiment for die-hard fans. There's no doubt in my mind that while this is interesting, the director's cut is still the definitive version of the movie.